Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 1 Million Cent Podcast, where together we are reaching a generation endangered by training 1 million teens to share their faith in everyday life by 2030. And my name is Ryan Fontenot, and I'm the host of this podcast. Whether you are a leader, a parent, and yes, I know you're out there, even a teenager, we are so glad you have dropped by to hear what God has for us today. As you know, each of our podcasts are a little bit different. I will take time to interview someone on some of our episodes, and then I'll have somebody teaching on another episode. Today, I'm super excited to be interviewing a friend of mine, someone who I have known about for a long time, and a little over a year ago got to connect at an event together, and you are going to absolutely love this podcast. You're going to want to tune in. You're going to want to take notes, and I promise you, you're going to want to share this out. So would you help me welcome our guest for today, Miss Amy Davison. Amy, how are you today?
Hey, doing great, Ryan. Really grateful to be here.
I'm so excited. I'm telling you, I have a lot of friends on the podcast. I have a lot of people that I'm always excited about. But what you and your ministry do, it's some of my favorite stuff. And I think it's probably some of my favorite because it's been some of my wife's favorite as well. So thanks for what you're doing. Yeah, and I'm super excited for you to be here, and I hope you're doing well today. And say before we jump into like the interview and who you are and what you do and all that crazy stuff, let's start out with what I call some warm-up questions. Are you ready for that?
I think I can handle it.
Okay, so I know you guys write books. I know you probably read a lot of books, but here's my question I like to ask people because I like to glean wisdom. What is one of your favorite books?
Oh, gosh. And see, that's a hard one because there's so many really great ones out there. But yeah. I think if I were just to pick one, it would be Nancy Pearcey's Love Thy Body. I just love how she breaks everything down, not just marrying the theological understanding of who we are as human beings, but also integrating the biological, the psychological. It's just, and then the philosophical history behind it. I'm a stats nerd. I love all background details and kind of seeing the man behind the curtain. And so how she lays out her chapters are phenomenal because you get that whole person concept within all the realms of study. And I am just deeply appreciative of all of her work.
Wow. Well, see, this is why I asked the question. It's really a selfish question. I'm trying to figure out what books I need to read next. That's one I need to grab. So.
And it's great. And you'll always have a shelf of books that you intend to read, and it just keeps growing.
Yes.
So add that one because it's definitely worth it.
Hey, it's going on the list today. I hope y'all go on the list as well. Second question is this: hey, who is maybe one of the most influential people in your life? I know a lot of us, man, maybe it's a mom or it's a dad or it's a coach, a teacher, maybe a youth pastor. I don't know. And I know in all of our lives, there are several influential people, but who comes to mind when you hear that? Who is someone that you think has influenced you to be where you are today?
It would have to honestly be my husband and you know, family as a whole, because where I am today is because of them. I mean, it was because of my husband that I strive to order the home and how I carry myself and study and bring up the children. You know, I want to make sure that we're bringing up these godly individuals. And so with seeing how hard he works and the effort he puts in, I want to make sure that, I'm doing that for him as well. And so he's one that I really admire, and he helps boost me up. I mean, I'm kind of a meeker, or I was kind of more of a meeker person by nature, and he's more of an outgoing person. And so it's been great to be nurtured by someone like that who can journey alongside you on your walk to Christ, but also help motivate you to be bold in the faith. And so many opportunities of being bold in the faith have come from his encouragement.
All right, well, he better tune in and watch this because if that's a high praise right there. I love it. I love that, and it's funny because a lot of people unfortunately, for whatever reason, marriage gets a bad rap, and so I love to hear it when people brag on their spouses. And I think if I was to talk about Heather, a lot of the same things was like, hey, this is why I'm here today, because of her encouragement. It's why I have a book that was written. This thing would not be written if it wasn't for her, So it's like it would not be done.
Well, because
So,
they shoulder the burden. Like when we were
oh
writing
yeah,
the
yeah,
Mamabear Sexuality book, I
yeah,
mean, there were so many
yeah,
times where he just smiled as we once again had cereal for dinner,
yeah.
just because of everything that happened during the day. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
they journey along with us.
No doubt, no doubt. That's awesome. Well, so we got your favorite book, influential person. Here's a question: like, if you could say, "Hey, here's a really good day for me." If you could paint a picture of I'd say a perfect day, but a really good day. Like this outside of work, right?
Right,
This
right.
is you, your family, whatever. What would that day look like?
It would have to be in an amazing forest somewhere. So I grew up
Mm.
in Washington State,
Oh
and so
yeah.
we have one of the only North American rainforests, and I remember
Hmm.
just frolicking through the woods like a hippie, basically. And there's not as many forests here in Texas that are as
No.
easily accessible as Washington. And so my
Yeah.
perfect day would probably be just taking the family. We could just go hike out in the forest, picnic lunch, swim in the lake, and just enjoy each other's
Boom.
company.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that so much. I love that. I love that. I love the fact that your family is an integral part of your life and your ministry. And speaking of family, you have three boys, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And there is a baby girl on the way. Is that right?
Yeah, she's coming here hopefully in the next 3 weeks or so. All of my
There
boys
you
were
go.
late. Like they had to be served
Oh,
eviction papers to get
get
their
out.
entrance into this world. And so I'm really hoping this pregnancy has been very different. So I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, what if she's on time or early? And
Hey.
so it's been so fun to buy the frilly girly stuff. I will
Yeah.
confess that buying for a girl is more fun because there's just so much more,
Yes.
so many more accessories.
That's right. Yes. My wife said the exact same thing. She's like, buying for boys kind of boring, but girls, there's all kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks for taking time. I'm glad we got this podcast in before that baby girl arrived, and no, we're praying for a healthy delivery and baby and mama. So thank
Oh,
you for
thank
being
you.
on here today. Yeah. Well, let's jump in now and let's talk a little bit about what you do. I noticed behind you got the MBA. That's not a master's in business administration. At least I don't
Nope.
think so. It
No.
stands for Mamabear Apologetics. Can you please tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what is this Mamabear Apologetics? What in the world?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was awesome. It was the brainchild of Hillary Morgan Ferrer. And she created this ministry. God really put it on her heart to create a ministry geared specifically toward women, especially within the realm of apologetics. And so often apologetics, I mean, just like the realm of theology is
Mm-hmm.
very male dominant, and not saying
Mm-hmm.
that that is a bad thing, but there are ways in which women can articulate biblical truth
Yes.
that touches other women, and we tend to really focus on the practical. Like pretty is for Pinterest, practical goes in the purse. And when you can show another mom that, oh my gosh, in the midst of the daily life crazy, here's this theological truth that's super relevant to where your kids are at right now, or here's something that your kids are going to be facing, and here's that First Peter 3:15 response that we can help equip them to be warriors in the faith wherever they are, whatever school setting they're in, whether it's co-ops, private schools, or public schools. I mean, they're going to be facing the world. And so that is what Mamabear is all about. It's about equipping
Yeah.
moms in a way that reaches them exactly where they're at, that acknowledges the messy and crazy, but helps them raise kids who are theologically sound, who can stand firm in the faith and be bold in the spirit that is within them. And so that's what Mamabear is about. We've got blogs, we've got podcasts, we've got several books that have already come out, and we've got a new one coming in March. There's one that is kind of it's a wonderful book just focusing on prayer. And so all these different types of prayers, Hillary Morgan Ferrer and T.C. Cannon work together on this project, and it's just beautiful because it's okay, for the mom who's in the midst of pregnancy, here's a great prayer for you, or the mom who's in the midst of a loss, here's
It's
a prayer
awesome.
for you. And just a way of pouring out into our ladies that are often our audience. But one blessing is even though we're called Mamabear Apologetics, we have so many Papa Bears that are part of our community, and Grandmama and Grandpapa Bears, and there are even teens that read our book, which is fantastic because we write from a conversational point of view. We infuse our humor and daily life right in the text while pointing back towards Scripture, and it's a fun ministry to be a part of.
Well, we are definitely going to be dropping all of your resources and links on all our show notes and things like that. But I just want to say, as a personal testimony, all of your resources have blessed us. I think we have every book y'all have written, and so in our house. And it's funny because my wife was really the first one who discovered Mamabear Apologetics. I was like, well, she's like, you've got to listen to this podcast. And I'm like, but it says Mamabear. She's like, just listen to it. And I was like, this isn't just for moms. This is awesome. And so as someone who travels the country and really the world and speaks to teens now, it has been a blessing to me, an encouragement to me. And I try to share your resources every time it comes up. I love apologetics, but I love y'all's approach to it as well. And so thank you for helping equip moms and grandmas and dads and granddads and even teenagers, like you said. So we're going to get into some specifics maybe on a couple of the books that are out there, because I think in our culture and the climate of today, it's so important. But can you maybe share with us, like, why does apologetics, why do these conversations and these resources matter to you so much as a woman, as a wife, as a mother, as a leader in the church and the kingdom? Why do they matter to you so much? What's your passion behind this?
I always wanted to know the why behind things. I think a lot of us within the apologetics community, we kind of have a common background of, we were the kid that would always be like, well, why? And we wanted to know the reasoning, the justification behind it. And it makes sense, right? Because when you understand the why, that's where reverence is nurtured. So, I mean, we can all think of a day when someone said, well, because I told you so, or because I said so. And it's like, well, that isn't great. And so when we can actually go and understand the why behind God's design, then it makes sense to why his commands are given in such a way and why there are guardrails in place and no's that are given. And so being that person and growing up in my teen years, I didn't have a lot of answers to that why. And there was a time where I walked away from the faith. I dabbled in Wicca for about a year and ended up coming to faith right before going to basic training, which if you're ever going to come to faith, before you go to basic training is definitely a great time to do it, because it's just you and Jesus in those dormitories.
That's right.
And so then in seeing that, okay, now when we started having children, I was like, wait a second, I want to make sure that they have someone they can come to who can help equip them and guide them in research, especially nowadays. I mean, with the influx of social media, people's attention spans are just really short. I believe they did a study to where the average human being's attention span is shorter than a goldfish, which I don't know how they tested that, but I read the I was like, seriously?
Wow, we have really gone south.
I know, right? But I mean, it makes sense when you can swipe and just have these sort of emotional appeals made. And so when we can actually help nurture our kids, our families, to not reject emotion, but instead keep it in its rightful place and say, okay, I'm passionate about this, but let me understand it first. Okay, is this actually an account of oppression, or is the Bible really being biased, or did God command something that was truly evil and capricious, or is maybe there's something more to this? When we can help guide our churches and our families to love God deeply, love with not just our hearts and our souls, but our minds as well, and that's where we see immense spiritual flourishing. And so, with you talking to teens, when you can help spark that renewed love for God and that pursuit for knowledge in a teen, it's like cool water. They just go off like a shot, and they want more resources. And so that's where my heart is. I wanted to make sure that my kids and people around me knew how important this was, how relevant it is, because anytime you start witnessing to someone, they're always going to have a yeah, but question that follows.
That's right.
And that's when you shift from evangelism to apologetics.
That's
and
good.
So it's a vital tool for the kingdom.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. I always tell people, hey, some people are like, well, you can't answer all the questions. So they kind of swing this one direction. We're like, well, you're never going to know everything. So don't know anything, and I'm like, that's
Right.
probably not helpful. Right. And then you got the
No.
whole other end of the spectrum. Well, I'm never going to tell someone about Jesus because, I'm learning, I'm still growing. I don't know enough. And you're like, no, don't do that either. It's this sweet
Right.
spot. I love the way you put that. Hey, let's have the conversation, start the conversation, be prepared with some answers, but be willing to continue to search for those answers together with resources and great things like what y'all put out. So I think that's so important, especially in our day and time with the plethora of information. Very rarely are teens today just going to go with the well because I said so. They're going to
Right.
need, they're going to dig a little bit. They're going to hear the other side of, if you will, of the coin, of people going, well, here's actually what the Bible says, and here's actually what God says, and did you know this? And if you can equip them ahead of time to go, yeah, actually, I did know that. Oh yeah, and here's actually what this means. So I love what y'all do specifically for those of you that may not be aware. Two of the books that we love from Mamabear Apologetics, empowering your kids to challenge the cultural lies. That's an incredible book. Just the title itself ought to make you go, "Hey, let me go find that and get that." The second one is empowering your kids to understand and live out God's design. Right? It's the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
both of these resources are tremendous. I think both do both have study guides now. Is that correct? Both have
Yes. Yep.
study
They
guides.
both have
So
study guides as well.
yeah. So I think this is something not only that if you're a youth leader listening, that I would challenge you to get a hold of and walk your students through. But as parents, this is something you can walk through with your teens and with your children as well, because I think it's so, so important. So let's talk about this. What maybe the one about challenging the cultural lies. What's one of your favorite maybe chapters of that book, or one that really resonates with you?
Oh gosh. I would probably say the one on postmodernism, which I believe was done by Elisa
Mm.
Childers. That one
Mm-hmm.
was really
Yeah.
helpful in understanding what the current thought is in culture, and
Mm.
how we get these phrases like "you've got your truth" and "I've got mine." Because
Mm.
I've seen that personally.
Yeah.
I was a substitute in a Christian private school, and there was a 12th grade apologetics class, and they got it for one semester, their senior year. And they were tasked with giving an evangelistic account. They're supposed to pair up, and they had 15 minutes to write just briefly how they would share their faith with an unbeliever.
Mm.
And after 15 minutes, I was like, all right, guys, what you got? And nobody had written anything. And I was
Oh,
thinking, okay, well,
wow.
I messed up on the directions somehow. Like, this has to be a me thing. And so I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
guys, did you not get it? Did I not explain something? And they're like, well, no, Miss
Mm.
Amy, I know this is our truth, but they have their truth, and that's okay,
Wow.
right? And these were kids. Most of them had
Mm.
grown up in this Christian private school from pre-K 3. So 3 years old, they've
Yeah.
been in this private school, and they had no idea truth existed. They had
Wow.
no idea they had adopted this relativistic worldview, and that objective truth existed. So I don't know if the original teacher was too happy for me, but I scrapped the whole lesson for the rest of the class. It was like a block day, so it was an hour and a half class. I'm like, okay, we're not going
Yes.
to move further. Let's just talk
Gotcha.
about the nature of truth.
I
And
love it.
so, and that I think is so helpful, that chapter alone, especially
Mm.
because so much of that is rooted in our culture today, in our worldview of what we
Mm-hmm.
do with our bodies, how we approach our identity. It's this complete rejection of God's design, and now we
Yeah.
become the God of our own religion. I become
Mm-hmm.
that idol. I become the arbiter of truth, and to where
Mm.
now, I mean, I even think we've shifted from postmodernism, because postmodernism, while it recognized it reduced everybody's view to basically an opinion, but there's no
Right.
power in that. And so I think
Right.
nowadays we've shifted to more of this meta modernist approach, which is
Mm.
slightly different in that it says, I've got my truth, and my truth is now your truth.
Oh,
And you have
yeah.
to change to affirm me. And that's where we see changes in
Wow.
legislature and education occurring, because they needed an objective grounding. And if we can ground it in the individual's subjective sense of self, well, then anything can go. We can completely obliterate God's design. And that's what
Wow.
Satan always done. He's always trying
Yeah.
to corrupt God's design. And this has just been a really effective method in our culture for what we're seeing.
Wow, that's So yeah, look, that shift is so real, and we can see that in, hey, we just want equality to we want,
Yeah.
acceptance to now we want full on affirmation. And if there's not full on affirmation, then you're the problem, And so that's the scary thing, is now that's what we move to. And speaking of the whole sexuality thing, and I know last year at the conference that you and I were at, which you absolutely nailed your sessions and did an incredible job. But you talked about this movement in sexuality, gender confusion,
Yeah.
and we can call it whatever we want to. But I know if we say too many words and we get blocked on YouTube and stuff like that.
Right.
But so how do we navigate, these waters if a parent or a youth leader is like, hey, how do I help navigate these waters, this storm that we found ourselves in? I mean, again, I think people react a couple different ways, right? They retreat and say nothing, or they go the whole other end and they do it minus the gospel. So where's that messy middle, that we're
Yeah.
called to walk in almost,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That balance between grace and truth is so
Yeah.
important because our
Yeah.
culture has been nurtured to be hypersensitive to any sort of
Hmm.
challenge, to where
Right.
if you even just engage in an idea, just talking about the subject of an idea, that is now
Hmm.
considered hostility. I believe there's a
Hmm.
legislator up in Montana who he identifies as a woman, and he said we can't talk about these issues. You're not allowed to talk about them because it could drive somebody to suicide. And wait a second, that's
Mm.
all the more reason why we need to be talking about this,
Yes,
because
that's right. Yes.
clearly there's something else going on.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And so for our kids, how we do this is we have to recognize that the battlefield has changed. It's shifted to where the things that we took for granted 5 years ago are things
Hmm.
now that we have to teach is actually existing. The fact that male and
Hmm.
female exist, that there is range within femininity and masculinity. And those are
Mm.
conversations that you never had to have with your kids. Probably your parents didn't have
Right.
them. Same with in my
Yeah.
situation. But we now need to have these foundation level conversations because the enemy is now reaching our kids at foundational levels. I mean, we're talking
Mm.
Blues Clues, Bubble Guppies. There's now gender affirming daycares to where you will send your little 18-month-old off to daycare and they'll be doing pride activities. And if we are not
Mm.
pouring into them, then they're not only going to be desensitized to what they see around them, which with kids, in some ways, that's a good thing, right? Because every child,
Yeah.
when they're caught off guard by something, they ask a very awkward question really
Right.
loudly. So in some cases,
We've all been there.
oh man, and it's always a super
Yeah.
crowded aisle.
That's right. Yes.
But so they'll be desensitized, but then it'll become normalized, meaning that they'll
Hmm.
think just because I see it often, or because I hear these rudimentary arguments of, oh, if you like rough and tumble play or climbing trees, playing in the mud, well, actually you're more likely to be a boy. Or if you're soft
Wow. Yeah.
spoken and do
Yeah.
crafts and just have more female companions, well, you're more feminine by nature. And actually, if you're feeling uncomfortable with who you are, it might be because you're actually supposed to be a girl, which are
Yeah.
logically valid arguments, but they're completely unsound. But so many of our kids, they will hear the validity of the argument, but they won't interact with the soundness. It'll just, oh, well, that makes sense. And on social media now, you can take tests, little social media quizzes to see how masculine and feminine your brain are. Are you gay? All of these things. So for our kids, we need to emphasize the foundation that God made them male and female. And both are made in the image of God, that there's range within masculinity and femininity, which we see throughout Scripture, from Esau and Jacob to David to Joseph, nurturing and caring for Christ, to Joanna, to Martha, Deborah, who was a judge who went to the edge of the battlefield. I mean, hoorah, my fellow military chick. But when we do those simple things and point back to truth, we can completely debunk gender theory quite easily, because it's heavily based on superficial stereotypes that are directly anchored in today. I mean, in the Victorian era, boys were supposed to be dressed in pink because pink was a vibrant, loud color. And if you've ever had a little boy in your house, you know that for the most part, those little children are very loud and boisterous. And girls were supposed to be dressed in blue because that was calm and demure. And now our culture's kind of flipped. Girls are more dressed in pink, boys are more blue. And so, but these are all cultural anchors. And that's what so much of gender theory tries to anchor. Who you are is based on these cultural anchors and exploit avoiding discomfort and anxiety potentially that can happen during puberty.
Right.
And we need bold church leaders who are saying, no, you know what, being 14, 15, it's rough. You're trying to figure out who you are. Junior high and high school are 6 long years of an existential crisis. You're just trying to figure out who you are, and that's okay.
Right.
And just because you like a certain sport or an activity, that doesn't determine who you are. I mean, we used to call it personality and style, and now we have gender identity and expression. I mean, it's co-opting of these words and twisting them into these identity anchors that are now supposed to determine who you are. But no, they just describe you. They don't define you.
I like that last. They just describe you. They shouldn't define you. And now it's like, hey, now they define you. Now you make these massive body altering, literally decisions when you are even pre-pubescent, and that's the crazy. It's shocking. And I think if anybody looks in from the outside, they go, what is happening here? But I know, so these are the waters we're swimming in right now. And I know unfortunately, a lot of church leaders are afraid to really, step into the waters. They're afraid to talk about it. They're afraid to speak into that, and because of whatever their fear may be, who knows, whether it's approval of man, whether it's canceling, whether it's people leaving the church, who knows, the fear level can range. What would maybe one step be that you could encourage leaders, specifically when I say leaders in the church and leaders in the home, what would be one step that you would say that they could take to get sure footing so that they could speak truth with grace and love, but speak truth and not, everybody's like, well, I don't want to be judgmental or whatever, but okay, so not judge, but they want to speak the truth. They want to do it in love. They want to have conversations. They don't want to necessarily drive people away. But what is maybe some really good first steps or 1 or 2 steps they can take to begin to get their footing, stand on solid ground, be able to address these conversations like this?
Yeah, and you covered a lot of the tension that's there. I mean, recognizing that this is a spiritual battle, for one, is necessary to entering in on this subject. And then 2, you need a time of prayer and reflection, and kind of reflection around, what is true and whom do I fear? Because I've gone to speaking events to where other churches been reached out to, like, hey, we got this event coming, and they say, no, we're not going to promote this. We don't want to be political. And it's, wait a second, all of morality is always politicized. I mean, you really can't. Right. So it comes down to what is true and whom do I fear? And Jason Whitlock is a podcast co-host. And I love what he said. He said, when we are fearful before God, we are fearless before culture. To where when we understand God's design and the importance of it, and the fact that, wait a second, we may not want to be seen as judgmental or arrogant or bigoted or whatever, but we have to recognize that it doesn't matter how nice you speak truth. If you're speaking truth, you're going to rub against the grain. And so are you willing to have a tiny bit of persecution for the furtherance of the kingdom? Then are the people you're speaking toward, are they worthy of the gospel? Because if
stop right there. That's big right there. I think that's, you just hit my heartbeat right there. Right? It's like, say that again. Are the people you're speaking to, are they worthy of the gospel?
And I mean, we will cave to feelings over and over and over again. But wait a second, it's not feelings we're trying to reach. We're trying to reach their souls, and we're trying to bring as many people to the foot of the cross as possible. And if that's the case, then you know what? I don't mind experiencing a little bit of discomfort. And it's one of those to where we as Christians, we should actually see that as a marker that, okay, we're in ministry. We're going to get pushback. And so our goal isn't to try and make everybody happy. It's to instead reach them with the very message that somebody thought was worthy enough for us to hear. And so keeping that in perspective, like, hey, I'm just another beggar trying to show another beggar where bread is, you know?
That's so good.
And then, there's so many resources available out today that were not available 5-10 years ago. And it's wonderful because sometimes we can feel daunted by the battlefield, but God's already gone before. He's already succeeded. And there are already sojourners alongside of us that have immense wealth of material. So, like I mentioned, Nancy Pearcey's Love Thy Body, her newest book on toxic war on masculinity, is also hyper relevant to today. Our book on sexuality is a great, non-shocking way of tackling so many of the issues. We weren't able to get to everything. Unfortunately, we had word count limits, but it's a great, accessible way, because sometimes you just need to be like, okay, here it is. And here's kind of a goofy story of how, we entered in on this. And so many churches have had conferences just because we had a couple ladies start a book club at church and be like, hey, we need to read this because this is coming off my 10-year-old off the school bus. And now they're talking about gender identity and a friend who's wrestling with it. And so humbly coming before God, recognizing who it is that we are reaching, and then seeking out resources, because Satan loves to make us feel isolated and incompetent. And if he can intimidate us by the battlefield, then he can often intimidate us into silence. However, when you can get the language, when you can get the terminology, when you can get the understanding behind the issue that you're facing, boldness can often be nurtured within that. So maybe insecurities are rooted in just a lack of knowledge. So go read up, grab an article, listen to a blog, and recognize that, wait a second, these people who they have genuine hurts and vulnerabilities. And God, if there's someone in my congregation that's struggling in this way, so often, if you hop on social media to like detransition boards on Reddit or Horror Questions, so many people are crying out for someone just to talk to them. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that on these boards is, I wish someone had just talked to me. And we can be that someone. That's not hard to do. Buy a coffee and talk to the person and let them know, look, your struggle may not be my struggle, but I got struggles too. And I'm here for you. And here's a latte in the process. I mean, it's amazing what that can do.
That's right. Oh, it's so good. I love every bit of that. I think those points are massive and important for us. And walking in a community of believers who are equipped. I love what you said. Satan loves to make us feel isolated and incompetent, because he knows when we walk in community with knowledge and wisdom, I mean, man, the church is unstoppable. But unfortunately, so many of us have refused to even have the conversations, refused to even get resourced. We think, well, the culture must be right. And we can really, if we would just take time. And so I just want to encourage everybody listening or watching, please find some resources. Get one of the Mamabear books. Go to Amazon. They're right there. It's super easy. Click on it. Get it. We'll drop some links in the show notes too. I know they're on all of the Audible things as well. And their podcast. You're like, well, I'm not a reader. We'll subscribe to their podcast and listen to it. You can get equipped, and every little bit helps. And that last part you said is massive, because this generation loves community. They are big on relational equity. And if you will just have a conversation with them, sit down, be quiet, and say, I'm here to listen. It will go so far in giving you the equity for them to, in turn, listen to some of the wisdom that we have, that are ahead of them, and learn along with them. So, Amy, I just love, I love what y'all are doing. I love your ministry. I'm so thankful for what God has just put you, I believe, in this time, in this place, for a reason. I will continue to cheer y'all on and just be there to support y'all in any way that we can. But for people maybe looking to, hey, what's the best way to stay connected with you, your ministry? Where would you send them to?
We are on the social medias, so all you have to do is hop on. We got Facebook for all the boomers out there, and we're also on Instagram. Slight presence on TikTok, and so Mamabear. So it's Mamabear Mamabear Apologetics. If you type that in, you'll find it. Or even if you visit our website, Mamabear Apologetics, one giant word.com, you can get connected at the bottom of the web page to all the links of our social media presence. And we do blogs. We also have a really great audio apologetics blog to where we take other really great articles, whether it's from Christianity Today or Women in Apologetics, and we have someone who reads them for the audio learners of the group.
Boom.
And so, which is great, right? Because anytime you're on an errand, well, cool, 15 minutes, here's an article that I can listen to. And so we've got resources for everybody, regardless of your learning style.
I love that, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what y'all are doing. I know a lot of our time is spent on just preparing people to have Jesus conversations, but like you said, in the midst of those Jesus conversations, people are going to have questions, and so this apologetics resources really helps give answers to what I would say are really good questions a lot of teens and a lot of adults have. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. They walk hand in hand together. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute joy. And again, I'm so glad we got you before this baby girl came into the world, but I can't wait to meet her. I know we'll catch up in February together at a conference again, and excited to have you part of Empower with us also. So, hey, for everybody who's listening or watching here today, I just want to say thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check out the show notes to find all of the resources that we're talking about here today. Hit up Mamabear Apologetics. .com. You will not regret it, I promise you. And if you're looking for any kind of resource to help you begin to have Jesus conversations in everyday life, don't forget to stop by 1millionsent.com, because together we're aiming to train 1 million teens to share the gospel by 2030. Thank you for tuning in today. And don't forget this, if you were encouraged, share this out. Tell somebody about it, because I promise you, if God encouraged you, God can use that share to encourage someone else. So let's go tell our world about Jesus today.